Hambini fans, and welcome. In today's episode of the Hambini Engineering Show, we have a teardown of these. Representing vaginas all over the world, we have these wheels. Now, these two wheels were sent to me by a chap who had an issue with mainly the front wheel, in the sense that the bearing's completely shafted and won't turn. So we're going to go through a bearing replacement on the front and rear wheel bearings today. So this is the Hunt rear hub. These particular hubs I've seen on a number of different wheels. I wouldn't say they're all that bad, but they exhibit always the similar kind of problem, which is the free hub tends to get bitten quite a lot, especially on the low gears. That's not particularly hard. In terms of bearing service, it's fairly easy. The other thing to note is these hubs are available in a different number of fitments. All they do is just change the end caps, and I'll show you that in a second. First thing to do is to get a couple of 5mm Allen keys in either side of the wheel and just turn it anti-clockwise, like that, and then we can undo this. It's actually this side that's coming apart.
Off comes the cap. A soft blow hammer and just tap the axle out. Put your hand over that side. Turn it. Just be very careful when you do this because the poles might drop out. And one of the poles. Nope, they're all there. So this is the free hub system. This one's fine. It's rotating on there. There's no grittiness or anything like that. But the next job is to change the bearings on that bit. Now, inside here is like an internal sleeve which sets the preload clearance up. You can't actually see that on the camera, but you can feel it. It's just basically a tube. When I take this out, you'll see it. What we have to do is we have to move that kind of out of the way and then tap onto a bearing to knock it out. So we'll use that and a hammer and then the flange surface and then just tap. Well, eventually. My hammering halfway because the bearings popped out, but hopefully I get a small Allen key. You can see the internal tube in there, so just move that out of the way just to tap this bearing out. I think we got that out. There we go. Now we do the same thing on the far side. It's a bit easier on this side because there's no tube. Right, so this one's not budging, so we're going to have to use a different technique to get this one out, so I'm going to draw this out. So for this, what we've got is, we've got a long M12 stud, you could use 1/2 inch, and then a socket to go on the end of it, and that fits into the bearing. Push that through, flick that over, and then just basically a piece of metal. And then I'm just going to build this up so I don't have to thread the tool down for ages. Right, get the handle. Oh no. Just need to get a ratchet on the end of there and then we're good to go. So I've just wound in a bit of tension and let's give that a go. Aha, the bearings come out, it's there. And these are the bearings that came out. They are 6902, so we need to replace these. These bearings with the orange seals or red seals are NTN replacements, so they are 6902 LLU, which is the equivalent part number. So we need to clean these seats up first of all. I have just measured them to check they were okay. The one on the other side was a bit tight, which was the one we had a problem getting out. So if you've got that, just make a note. All I'm using is NLGI level 2 grease, so I'll put some in there just to aid assembly because it was tight. Flip the wheel over, remove that. Now we can press the bearings in. It has to be done in one go, so bearing in one end, tube in the middle, and bearing the other. I'll just set this up and then we'll clamp it up. Now, to clamp this up, what you need is a socket that is ever so slightly smaller than the outside diameter of the bearing. So in this case, I'm using a 19. It's going to vary depending on the brand that you have. If you use a 1/2 inch, then you can use a M12 or 1/2 inch stud bar. So that's what I'm going to do. Clamped up, so all we do is just tighten this up till it stops. Now, because it's M12, that tube through the middle is effectively self-centered. So the stud has lined it up and it's bang in the correct position. Need to reassemble the free hub, and we're just going to give it a clean and put some grease in it. I've taken the pawls off, the springs are still in, but we're just going to clean that all up. Make sure there's nothing untoward on there. Then go from there. If anything, this probably is getting towards the end of life because you can see the bearing looks like it's under rotated on there and it's taking a groove into the shaft. Now I haven't measured every parameter on there, but I'll go through it in a minute with regards where that damage has come from. Now when you reassemble this, you really don't want to put thick grease in here because otherwise the pawls won't work. So don't be tempted to put thick grease, but people do put thick grease in there and that results in like ghosting. So it looks like they spin the chain up and say, wow, look at my bearings, they're really low friction. It's just rubbish. So you just check the pawls are all working and then apply a small amount of grease. You can either apply it on here or it's possibly better to put it into the wheel. But I'll put a bit on there and wipe round the excess off. So the grease I'm using is a a single zero grease, so it's very thin. And just put this back into the ratchet hole. Make sure the tube is lined up, which is the tricky bit. Now when you put it in, you just need to turn it so the ratchet engages. As you can hear, it's a lot quieter than it was the first time round. Then we just need to put the end cap back on, which is just threading that back up. Once that's done, tighten the 2 Allen keys. There we go. Don't know what the torque setting for that is, but really it's for your preload because that's where that is set up from. So now we move on to the front wheel. To do the front wheel, first thing we need to do is get these end caps off. So they pop off like that and like that. Now this is quite a small bearing, so we can use a dead blow mallet or a hammer and then just give it a tap. And that's not moving, so we'll try it the other way. Now to get this off, we're going to have to jack this off, so we're going to put that on the bottom and that, which is a couple of washers and a handle on the top, and then draw it out. So that one is a 27mm socket. We just turn this up. So that's one bearing out. So it should pop the axle out now. There we go, so it's one axle, one bearing. These are C's, so they're TPI bearings, or EZO, EZO. They haven't lasted very well. But anyway, that's out. So now we need to pop this one out. This time around I've got some more washers. Pop that through. I'll put the axle back in halfway. And get another handle. I mean, you could use a stud and a couple of nuts, but I'll just do this. Alright, that feels like it's out. That's not completely out, so I've got it moving because I've run out of travel on the socket, so just a couple of taps should get this out. There we go. So that comes out, so now we've got a hole straight through, so we can replace these bearings. These are the bearings that came out there, 6802 EZO. These are the ones that go in, they are Koyo 6802. The main reason for this is when I measured the preload adjustment, this is actually a better fit than the NTN because the spacing on here is fixed, so the preload you can't adjust. You have to measure that and that. Now it's probably being a bit anal, but the guy sent me the wheel, so I wanted to make a good job of it. I think for most people they probably wouldn't notice a difference, but then again, this channel isn't for most people. Once again, we'll clean all of these surfaces up. They've been checked. So that one and the other side. Now these fits are a bit on the tight side, so once again I'm using some NLGI 2 grease as opposed to the 0. So we'll put some on the surface there and on the other side, and then we'll get ready to clamp this up. Internally what we've got is we've got the bearing, and then the axle comes through like that. Make sure you get it in the right way. The bearing goes in there. Get the axle started. And then on the other side we'll put the other bearing and then clamp all of this up. Clamped up, we just tighten. So that's one in. Oh, in fact they're both in. So now we can just put the end caps on and we're done. So that's the wheel complete with the free rotating axle. So the previous bearings were seized and that's not even spinning at all, but surprisingly the axle stayed in fairly good condition. Finish this up, we'll just put these back in, and that's just a question of clipping them in. This is a technical slide, there's no real reaming yet. The table here shows the bearing sizes that were found and the bearings that you would need. So you predominantly need 02 series bearings. 02 is a 15mm bore. 6802s on the front and 6902s on the back, and the free hub has 6802s as well. The next bit, if you're not familiar with the channel, is an engineering tolerance for the hole, and what that really means is how tight or how slack the hole is. Typically we would aim for an M fit, so an M7. The 7 indicates what it's been made on, so a lathe, or if it's been ground it tends to be a 3 or a 5. I've also put a comment on the right hand side so you can understand what that means. So N7 is borderline tight, P7 is tight, and it's really tight, and you saw that in me trying to get the bearings out. If you are going to replace your bearings, then it's quite important in this case that you probably go for something with a high-end bearing clearance, so the top end of the bearing clearance for a retrofit. I mean, the bearings that have been removed are of poor quality, and you're going to see that in the reaming video to come, but you know, I'll leave it at that. The point that I would take away from this video, if you've watched up to now, is by design and specification, these wheels are of extremely poor quality and will have quite a poor life associated with that. The fact that they use an 02 series bearing, 15mm bearing, on a disc hub is, you know, open to interpretation, and it will be open to my interpretation. So that's where we are. And that is the end of this video. If you did enjoy it, remember to smash that like button. If you didn't, go screw yourself. And as always, keep banging your hairdresser.